Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PBSC podcast. Steve Moore and Mark Castleman coming at you with episode 309 today. This is a kind of a cool episode that we're going to do today. It's a little bit different in the sense that we don't have a specific question that's being asked in terms of like a problem to definitively solve, but we did have someone write into us about some training and some expansion in the clinical, in our clinical background that Mark and I have been doing lately with Dr. Omar Minwalla, as we've been going through some trainings of his. And he, having heard this and being a listener, wrote us in and had some questions. So we'll read this to you really quick, and then we'll jump right into today's topic. And this is what he says. Hello, gentlemen. I am an addict in recovery, a veteran D2C subscriber. So he's a member of our Dare to Connect program and an active PBSC podcast listener. I was hoping that you guys could take some time to detail something that I have recently discovered that struck a chord with me. Oftentimes, we talk about the abuse cycle as it pertains to either physical, emotional, verbal, or sexual abuse, which is true. We do this pretty extensively in our Dare to Connect program, and you've heard us do episodes about it on the podcast before as well. I've been listening to some work from Dr. Minwalla myself lately about the secret sexual basement. So that's a term that Dr. Minwalla uses to describe kind of the whole secret keeping mechanism behind addiction. We're going to talk about that more in a second. Given that the two of you have recently just done extensive training with him, I was wondering if you guys would be willing to discuss the idea of integrity abuse. Until becoming familiar with this term, I most closely related with the emotional and sometimes verbal abuse cycles. While there are many aspects of emotional and verbal abuse that I definitely took part in, where I would verbally abuse or emotionally abuse my partner, there were still many aspects of these types of abuse that didn't really match up. When I learned about all the facets of integrity abuse and what it actually entails, I found myself ticking every box. Being able to take the actions, the gaslighting, the lying by omission, the taking advantage of her trust, taking advantage of her belief in me, and all the other ways, and understanding how it can be so succinctly defined as integrity abuse has been very helpful in actually naming the problem for me. It's been very helpful in understanding the cycle, and it's been very helpful in understanding the impact. So, well, this isn't a long submission. I'm hoping that you might be able to use this as an opportunity to delve more into the concept of integrity abuse so that I can continue to further my understanding and so that other addicts like me might have a better understanding of the action and impact. So,
yeah, submission. I like it.
Today's episode is all things integrity abuse.
All things integrity abuse. Yeah, and I think, the first thing we should point out, because these often become very confused, integrity abuse and addiction are not the same thing. So be very careful with that, because I know myself, they're not just me, but lots of people say, well, I'm not an addict, or I don't have addiction, therefore this integrity abuse thing doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
Right? Or vice versa. Well, yeah, I have addiction, but not integrity abuse. And so while they're not the same thing, we will tell you that they very nearly always intersect with each other at some place. Right?
Yeah. No, there is a lot of overlap between the two. It is true. But we need to keep those terms distinct from one another, because it is common when you're working kind of in this whole addiction, betrayal, trauma world, whether you're an addict or a partner or a professional, to sort of kind of lump all of these different terms in, and they're all just, everything's a part of everything. And that's not the case. Addiction, just so we're all on the same page, right, is best described, by the clinical reference of it, right? It's going on in a given behavior or set of behavior or behavior patterns that are dysfunctional, detrimental, and we continue to go on and participate in them despite the various consequences, right? Emotionally, relationally, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. So we keep continuing to have a negative of dysfunctional consequences mounting to relationships, to ourselves, and in a variety of ways, but we continue to go on in that behavior despite those consequences. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's addiction. Integrity abuse is a subset of behaviors that oftentimes accompanies addiction. And we're going to kind of get into it here, but some of those behaviors, like he just mentioned in the submission, this listener, the lying, deceit, deception. These are all and the other things we're going to get into today are very common in the addiction world and oftentimes accompany addiction from the survival standpoint of the addict. Him trying to go along, to get along, trying to keep his real reality from colliding with the one he's made up, trying to secret keep and quote unquote protect his partner from his true past or true behaviors or whatever, right? And so a lot of that does accompany it, but integrity abuse is a standalone term that can absolutely happen outside of the addiction world.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
just want to make that clear.
Yeah, let's so we're going to jump right in. We're going to first talk about what integrity abuse is. We're going to talk about some specific examples of how the integrity abuse shows up as behaviors in a relationship, often accompanying addiction behaviors. And then we're going to talk about how integrity abuse, the direct impact that it has on the betrayed partner. So we're going to talk about those three areas. So let's just jump right in. When I first learned of this integrity abuse as a disorder, it's also referred to as integrity abuse disorder. I resonated with it like right away. It helped me as a guy in recovery to really start to put additional identifiers on my behaviors in my heavy addiction years. I absolutely engaged in integrity abuse. And we can talk about all the reasons why. I've often said on here, I learned as a kid that you lied to stay safe because when you dared to be honest or tell the truth, bad things would happen to you by the dysfunctional adults around you. So I absolutely lived in what we call an intentionally manipulated reality. And I very much presented that to my partner. So integrity abuse, one of the things that it is, first of all, it's a violation of core personal ethics within the relationship. Now, what does that mean? It means that integrity abuse occurs when the addict or the individual, if it's someone who doesn't have addiction, doesn't have to be an addict only, but when that person violates the basic moral contract of the relationship itself. Right? When we enter into a relationship, a long-term committed relationship, there are things that we agree to, as it's a moral contract: honesty, transparency, responsibility, fidelity, safety, and even when there's no, this is very important, even when there's no overt emotional or verbal cruelty, the abuse of it's the abuse of trust, the abuse of the truth, and the abuse of the relational integrity. Those by themselves are abusive. That's the integrity abuse, even if it doesn't have some of the other telltale signs of the more obvious, emotional and verbal cruelty or physical. Integrity abuse is simply the abuse of the trust, the truth, and the relationship integrity. That's abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of like we started off with, if you were to, according to Dr. Minwala, integrity abuse is one of the primary component, if not the primary component, in terms of a source of harm that is a part of what he refers to as the secret sexual basement, right? And all of the behaviors that accompany it, the deceit, the gaslighting, right? The manipulation, the emotional thwarting. I mean, all of the things that accompany that are part of that. And integrity abuse is oftentimes difficult to identify for a couple of reasons, but one of the big ones is that it doesn't look like many forms of abuse in the sense that it is not usually, it oftentimes isn't flamboyant, for example. It can involve a lot of aggressive talk or yelling or those kinds of things, but doesn't necessarily need to. It oftentimes is done through subtle threats, for example, right? Moving into rescuing type behavior that is designed to position or maneuver a spouse to engaging with you in a way that's not authentic for them because of emotional pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, It's oftentimes embedded in secrecy, deception, fragmentation. Fragmentation is a big one that I did want to talk about as well, because one of the ways in which we see integrity abuse show up often, as the saying goes, right? Some of the most believable lies are the ones with just a kernel of truth attached. And it is very common with the guys that Mark and I work with, again, from a survival standpoint, for because they're so unacquainted or ill-equipped to face true accountability or to navigate the truth. Oftentimes there will be a lot of, it isn't a black and white. It's here's part of reality, but I'm manipulating the curtain in such a way that you only see the parts of it that I want you to
Yeah,
see.
yeah. The construction of a double life, right? It's
Yeah,
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah.
absolutely.
And another thing that this integrity abuse really involves, and as I sit here sharing this, looking back to my deep addiction days, it does bring me great regret that I had participated in this other form of integrity abuse, which was to do what? To exploit my partner's goodwill.
Yeah,
My wife, and I know this is true, Steve, of yours as well, and so many partners we deal with, they're naturally nurturing. They have great integrity. They care. They're kind. There's just so many wonderful things about them. And when we engage in this integrity abuse, often, for example, to hide our secret sexual basement, we leverage our partner's trust, their belief, their empathy, their commitment to us, while at the same time violating the agreements that whole trust is built on. They entered into the contract with us and they made themselves entirely vulnerable. And as I say, they put their whole selves into the relationship. This is very vulnerable. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to believe in you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to nurture you. I'm going to do all these things. Why? Because I know that in my doing that and honoring my side of the contract, you will do the same. That's assumed. And we use our partner's integrity against her
yeah.
because we're not living up to our side, but we're taking advantage of the fact that she is, based on the fact that she thinks we are. Right? Big imbalance and exploitation when we do that.
Well, and that last piece, right? The partner's integrity being used against them, it does tug at the heartstrings for those of us in recovery, including Mark and I. It's hard to recognize that we did that, and we're huge uh, participants in that. Something that we are actively avoiding and working to not no longer do in relationships.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, another element to integrity abuse, and again, this is super positive, so everyone get ready, right? is the length and the pattern nature to it.
Yes.
Integrity abuse is not as tragic as it is as a singular event would be. Integrity abuse is not. It is a pattern. It's a pattern of various things, right? The dishonesty, for example, isn't a single event of lying. It's a recurrent, ongoing pattern of half truths, or again, sharing the parts that are convenient. Oftentimes, there are other elements added to that, right? Some pieces to the truth are overly covered up. Other times, other elements to it are minimized, if left out, if not omitted entirely. A lot of gaslighting and turning the tables on partners is oftentimes employed as part of integrity abuse as well. Um, Even the relapse process itself and the transparency and accountability surrounding that, or the lack thereof, is fertile ground for integrity abuse to be present. Right,
Yeah.
when every time the addict becomes extremely defensive when confronted about a relapse, or is hiding it, or even not uh, proactively approaching it. All of these things are forms of integrity abuse that greatly impact a partner and their capacity, not just to connect with their addict partner, but to be able to trust their gut, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, right?
Yeah.
There's a real hollowing out pattern that way psychologically for a partner, where partners that questioning of reality that exists in any setting within betrayal trauma becomes greatly deepened the longer this pattern runs and goes on.
Well, and the thing about that pattern, Steve, is, as you talk about it, there's this whole architecture of integrity collapse before the partner ever learns the truth. Right? What is the person that's engaging in integrity abuse do? They lie, they cover it up, they minimize it, they gaslight it. Right? They get everything to the place where they've convinced the partner that everything's okay. So there's this calm, and then it goes back to the same thing again. Another lie occurs, or a relapse, and then there's secrecy, and then there's discovery. It just keeps spinning and spinning until the entire architecture of integrity has collapsed in the relationship. And often the partner doesn't even know that that's what's happening until discovery day, right? I like Dr. Manwala's description of this. You know, he talks about this abuse. One of the biggest parts of it is how it distorts reality, right? Because the relationship is now built on false information, the partner is forced to live in an alternate reality that the addict or the integrity abuser carefully manufactures. Right? I'm carefully manipulating the reality that we now live in. Yeah. Intentionally manipulating it. So the abuse is the manipulation of truth itself. That's the abuse. You're living in a reality that I'm manufacturing, and you, betrayed partner, don't even know that you are, often for many years. Yeah. You're going on the assumption that everything's okay, except that you feel this doesn't quite feel right. Or I'm getting, something's wrong here, but you don't know exactly what it is. Yeah. The whole integrity abuse deal.
This is one of those episodes where like every politician on the planet ought to be tuning in.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. It's so true.
We won't get political though here today, right? It's just widespread problem. So there are lots of examples of how this can show up in the context of actual addiction, right? Because again, integrity abuse is a subset of behaviors that we oftentimes see in the world of addiction. The dishonesty and deception piece, for example, is one that's most addicts and their partners are well acquainted with, right? And because lying and deception take so many different forms. There's active lying, there's passive lying, there's lying by omission, there's minimization, there's maximization, there's so many different forms that can take. But the phrase that comes to mind, anything but the truth, nothing but the truth, and all things excluding anything but the truth, or whatever they say in court, right, is the phrase that comes to mind, right? Is this idea that if there's either an inclusion of facts that are not true or an exclusion of things that are, to whatever degree, for whatever reason, we're now hitting in this realm of integrity abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was one we have noted here that I could relate to. We call it getting ahead of the truth when discovery feels imminent, right? I'm going to do damage control before the truth comes out. Yes. I'm going to start to manipulate things. One we talk about constantly, you've seen us do podcasts on it, gaslighting and what we call reality manipulation. Convincing the partner that she's the one that's overreacting, that she's controlling, that she's paranoid, she's insecure. Rewriting our history to hide the betrayal that we've caused. So we alter history. We start to put in little things that start to warp what actually happened, and try to convince everyone that that's the actual history. We shift blame. If you weren't so emotional, I wouldn't need to lie, right? Things like that. We minimize the severity. Well, it was just looking. I was just looking at some stuff on YouTube. It wasn't really what you thought it was. And besides that, everybody does this, right? This whole minimization. So gaslighting and manipulating the reality, twisting and bending it. Right? That's another aspect of how these behaviors show up. Hey everybody, PBSE podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that. Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today. Well, and exploiting trust and emotional dependence, of course, needs to be talked about here today. And definitely not my favorite fun fact, but here we go, right? Exploiting trust and emotional dependence of a partner can look like many things. Using your partner's belief, for example, in your own integrity or your quote unquote goodness, right, as a cover for secret behavior. Well, of course I would never do anything like that. Why would I? Yeah, I guess he wouldn't. I guess he wouldn't ever do anything like that. Right. Leveraging desire for connection to buy more time in secrecy. And that can show up in lots of ways. We're taking advantage of something that we agreed to in this relationship to supply freely with our partner. We're now leveraging or metering it or throttling access to it as a way to what? As a way to continue secret behaviors, as a way to continue to manipulate reality. Allowing a partner to continually invest in us and in a relationship that isn't real. My partner and that can look like lots of things. One of the things that we teach in Dare to Connect, for example, and one of the absolute hallmark bedrock cannot happen if a guy is sincerely in recovery, if he really is committed to the cause, is the guy is never going to engage in sexual behavior with his partner without having disclosed any relapses or relevant slips of any kind. And why is that? Because we at all costs are asking men who are serious about recovery to whatever else they're doing, giving their partner at least the baseline consideration of what? Consent. If you're going to be sexual with a partner, you deserve to know who that is. Who is this person that I'm being intimate with, physically, emotionally, etc.? Those are all examples of this exploitation. Saying whatever is necessary to keep a partner calm, to regulate her behavior, to keep her compliant. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Just talking about this just makes my skin crawl. Because, and I'm sure everyone listening to this, it probably does the same. While Mark and I can absolutely connect with the world in which one does this, because we've both been guilty of it, you can hear the level of nefariousness that goes on behind this.
Yeah.
And the impact that it can have emotionally for a partner who is not responsible for what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And another basic part that almost goes without saying, but it needs to be said, is just how this all violates the relationship agreement in the first place, right? So the addict, the integrity abuser, presents himself as loyal and connected, but he's maintaining a hidden life that whole time.
Mm.
He's promising transparency and openness or sexual integrity while he's violating all three of those. Engaging in secret consumption of porn and chats and images and masturbation patterns and affairs or fetish driven behaviors that contradict the values that he's stating that he has or putting across that he has. Right? All this is going on in the background. So the violation of the relationship agreement.
Well, and last but not least on this list that we want to make sure that we share because this is important, is sometimes it's referred to as fragmentation. We talk about it oftentimes on this podcast and in D2C as compartmentalization, right? Where we take and maintain different selective pieces of ourselves, and we only share or show those pieces of ourselves to different people at different times based on what is going to be most advantageous to us, right? Now, obviously, in relationships, we should make something clear here. We all should have boundaries, right? Conversations that I have with my wife, Brittany, are going to look very different in terms of tone, depth, detail, etc., as opposed to a conversation I might have with a client. But there's a big difference between shifting depth when it comes to boundaries and reflecting the closeness in a relationship versus isolating, segmenting off, and then denying the existence of whole other pieces of a person's world, right? And just saying, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. We were talking in an addict session, in fact, the other week, and I said something I've said more than once. Addicts not in recovery would probably make the world's best CIA operatives. It's
Yeah.
true, because they would be that compartmentalization that most addicts learn tragically. While it may make for a great spy novel or living some crazy world of James Bond's existence, when it comes to emotional connection with the self, with others, with living an emotionally connected life, it is completely incompatible with that standard of living,
Yeah. Yeah.
in any way.
And
Relationships are conditional on transparency and on
absolutely.
presenting, again, not just facets of a person, but the level of intimacy that I experience with another person is conditioned on what? How much of myself I am willing to share with that person.
Exactly. Exactly. There's another part I'm thinking about with this as we finish up how these behaviors show up. This we call it creating a false sense of safety. So I would engage in some really good behaviors when I would see that my wife was getting suspicious.
Mm, yeah.
To ease her suspicion, I'm going to do some temporary good behaviors. I'm going to offer reassurances like, I'm doing great, without any real concrete, lasting recovery work. Um, Maintaining separate selves. There's the self I show my partners. There's the self that is in the secret sexual basement. And then I was really good at switching personas depending on who was watching. Who did I need to impress? Who did I need to give the right impression to? And I would switch my persona depending on what was needed. And then this last one we made a note on presenting recovery language while acting out in secret. Oh man, could I use recovery vocabulary in the right settings and impress everyone with my deep recovery knowledge while I was actually still acting out as an addict in secret.
Mm,
So those
yeah.
are just a few of the behaviors. Um, let's talk as we close up here, Steve, about what is the impact of all of this integrity abuse on the betrayed partner? Because it's significant, right?
Yeah. And what we're going to share next, and this is not shocking given the nature of this episode, is going to be good to hear, but probably fairly triggering. So just kind of prefacing things that way. For betrayed partners, there are a lot of things that go on in this in the painful world of betrayal trauma. But one of the most significant for sure, and we do talk about this oftentimes. Dr. Minwala describes this as identity and reality collapse, where a partner begins to question because of all these behaviors that we just talked about, and having listed those and even looked at them, just kind of cursor in a cursory fashion, one can pretty quickly start to put together why a person would start to kind of question their entire reality. Many partners oftentimes, I remember not too long ago in my office, I used the example of, many of you have probably seen the movie with Jim Carrey in it called The Truman Show, right? Where he's kind of living in this manufactured reality. He's, the star of this TV show he doesn't even know he's in, right? And when I've used that example with partners before, they tend to resonate with that a lot, right? Coming out of betrayal and starting to see their situation as it really is feels like they're breaking out of the Truman Show,
Mhm.
and starting to actually start to see like, wow, how much of my reality was false, how versus real. She begins to question, and the problem with that is because she has been deceived or lied to in so many ways and for so long, and because the level of betrayal and this identity reality collapse happens on such a deep level, as in her role as a wife, as a partner, as a mother, as a etc. What happens as a result? There's a cascading effect where the realities of other lesser roles or other lesser, more existential parts to her reality also become called into question, right? The brain naturally says to itself, well, gosh, if I could be lied to or deceived about all of these things, what the crap else is going on in my life? Is anything real? Am I, and a partner also, again, not just a reality, but identity. Am I even intelligent enough to know? They start to question themselves intellectually. Do I have the capacity to even recognize when I'm being deceived?
Yeah.
Which obviously sets the stage for all sorts of shame and insecurity that should not exist.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Big ones. The other part of this, Steve, and this is where this is often the damage of this can be minimized. This is trauma response activation. When a betrayed partner has been living in an intentionally manipulated reality, and she starts to understand that this has been going on for years or decades, she experiences trauma symptoms that are identical to other forms of chronic relational harm that can be done to people. Right? This complex trauma, layered upon layered trauma, produces really powerful reactions in the survival brain. So she starts to experience things like hypervigilance. She becomes the detective, to the policewoman, to try to figure out, what else is he lying about? What else am I not discovering? We work with partners who have horrible intrusive thoughts where their thoughts spin around and around, where they just become obsessed with, what's he doing? What's he not doing? What don't I know? What do I know? Um, Nervous system, horrible nervous system issues, panic attacks, right? Anxiety, depression. A lot of this can really come on. Body shutdowns and sexual trauma responses where, right, she just feels like she's numbing out. She doesn't want to have any sexual contact or no touch, right? Really powerful responses that way. And just a complete loss of emotional and physical safety in her world. And we could go on to talk about a dozen different symptoms that show up because of this level of trauma. But this is trauma response activation.
Well, and the depth to all this that you can hear in these descriptions, guys, is I mean very real. I mean, you think about, for example, a partner becoming triggered when she is wanting to engage intimately with her partner, right? That is supposed to be, among whatever else it's supposed to be, one of the most emotionally safe, many would even describe it as sacred experiences a person can have. And what do partners find themselves doing now? Not only are they not able to enjoy or connect in that way, they experience the opposite, right? Instead of their world becoming safer, it becomes more scary. Instead of becoming a place to recharge and connect, it becomes a place to isolate and run. The tragic nature of that can't be overstated, which leads us into the next element of this, which is all things related to emotional isolation, right? When a partner begins to recognize how isolated she has been in this relationship, and even though she may not have been completely so from the addict's perspective, how does she feel and what is her reality anyway? Completely isolated. Why? Because she doesn't trust him, and understandably so, right? For her whole world is now upside down. And she is now facing the reality that the only way for me to be safe right now, at least this is the feeling for her, is I've got to do this me, just me. He's not safe. He's not reliable. He's not dependable. He's not a safe landing space for me. Um, and so what do we see happen here? I mean, lots of things lead to this. The addict has historically maintained connection by deceit and not with intimacy. There hasn't been connection. It's been portrayed as such, but it's not actually been connection, right? Oftentimes, partners, as they start to explore and see this emotional isolation, they see how withdrawn he has been. What do they start to see? Holy cow, I have been like the emotional pack mule in this relationship. I've been carrying both packs. for way too long.
Mhm.
He's not been carrying his part. This hasn't been a load that we've shared together. This isn't something we've been collaborating on. I've been dragging his weight with along with mine. And of course, when a partner is taken advantage of in this way and feels this way, and that is the reality that they've been placed in, well, of course, what is that going to lead to? Feeling foolish, discarded, not wanted, used. We hear that one from partners a lot.
We do.
And I can tell you, as a husband in recovery, of all the things that I ever want to be to my wife, a user of her is not one of the identities I want to ever take on.
No,
Right.
I know.
But nevertheless, again, here we are.
And one of the really, really heartbreaking things about this, Steve, is because this integrity abuse, this betrayal, it originates in the person that she's trusted the most in her life. And so when she realizes what's really been going on all these years, those emotional wounds cut deeper than you would find in just an ordinary relationship. It's what we call attachment injury. This can happen to us as little kids with our primary caregivers, right, with a mother or a father. And so this is a profound rupture in this partner's attachment security. We find that partners have long-term difficulty trusting even what becomes genuine honesty later.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to say, yeah, I'm being honest with her now. She won't believe me. What's going on? Well, dude, you had a massive, massive relationship rupture and attachment injury that you brought on this partner of yours. So yeah, she may never believe you again. Right? It's this disorganized attachment, response. She'll draw close to him, she'll pull away. She'll go to hypervigilance, she'll go to numbing out. Her entire attachment world is falling apart and in chaos. Right? Big part of this.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys can see, right, that the extensive scope of what we have going on here. And there are many other areas of this, and I know for sake of time, we're going to need to move along a little bit, and this is obviously a heavy podcast as well. We've already touched on the loss of bodily and sexual safety, right? The disruption, interference with, and frankly, ruining of what should have, and could have been healthy sexual cues.
Yep.
Those have all been greatly compounded. Speaking of compounded shame and self blame. This is a part that doesn't get talked about enough. But a partner, every person on planet Earth, we all have insecurities, right? This is part of the human condition. One of the breeding grounds, not the only one, but one of the prime breeding grounds where insecurity can morph and twist and warp into shame is betrayal. Those existing insecurities as a person that again we expect to be safely guarded by our partner, and that we're expected will be safeguarded together collectively by both of us. When those become violated, right? What naturally happens? It is very natural and understandable for a partner then to begin to say, "Well, gosh, I wondered if I had value, and I thought that I did." And part of what helped me to see that was that people in my life loved me and were willing to take care of me and help support me. But the person who's supposed to love and take care of me the most didn't. Maybe I'm not worth it.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't have value. Maybe that's wrong. Because clearly, I mean, I want to believe that I do, but the evidence that is standing before me would beg to differ, right? I should have seen it sooner. We talked about this a minute ago. If I'd just been smarter, better, stronger, faster, more intuitive, more capable, more sexual, more whatever, more crazy in the bedroom, if I had just done blah, 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 this wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so a partner unwittingly, from a shame-based perspective, begins to what? Take on the identity of this is now my fault. As if this couldn't be bad enough, here we are now, partners taking ownership of this.
Yeah, yeah. And we often hear partners say, my intuition's just broken.
Yeah.
It's just gone. And fine, to wrap up, one of the things, Steve, that you and I see that is so difficult as we try to help, addicts in true recovery. We've tried to help those guys who have engaged in integrity abuse, to start to learn to become honest at all costs, and partners start to, heal. There's still long-term erosion of trust and hope in that relationship. A partner is going to struggle for a long time to believe any future change that might be happening, because she's heard all the promises before. That guy's word is no longer meaningful to her. She doesn't know which version of him is real. And so it just the trust account is obliterated. And it's a big part of what we do to try to help these coupleships restore that.
Yeah.
Now we're not talking about any solutions today in this podcast because we don't have time. What we've talked about today, the solutions to this for both the addict, the partner, and the coupleship, if you want to start really getting into what to do about this now, come over to our Dare to Connect program. That's why it's called Dare to Connect, right? Dare to be honest, dare to start to improve trust, dare to live in an intentionally accurate and authentic reality instead of a manipulated one. Come over and find out how to do all of this. Right? Come over and take advantage of our free 2-week trial. We'd love to see you here.
Yeah. daretoconnectnow.com is where you can find that, everybody. And we do appreciate you being here. We know this has been a heavy episode, but there is hope and healing, and it is possible. And as always, if you like what you hear here, you will love the Dare to Connect program. If you would like to send us submissions for the podcast, you are also always welcome to do that. Right now, we're running about 3 or 4 weeks, 3 to 5 weeks, I would say, behind in terms of submissions and how quickly we can get to them. So in the absence of Dare to Connect, when you can get immediate help, you can send those in by going to that same website, daretoconnectnow.com. Just click on the PBSC podcast banner up at the top of that page, and that will take you to a contact form where you can send those in to us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here with us in some pretty hard discussion, but what we hope will be very helpful to start to recognize these things and begin to move forward. And we love and appreciate all of you, and we'll look forward to our next episode.
Absolutely. Have a great week, guys.
Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.